I was so happy to find out just a little while ago about Matriarch PAC, and also then to be honored to be asked to speak at your summit this evening. I'm doing things the old-fashioned way. I'll be reading most of what I say to you because that's what I do when they say it's a keynote. So if you see me not looking in the right place, it's because I'm looking at the paper. But nevertheless, as I said, I'm really excited to be with you. The theme class in feminism could not be more relevant at a time when women, specifically working class and poor women, who are also disproportionately women of color, are bearing the brunt of the multiple crises that we face. The COVID pandemic, the economic depression, which has needlessly resulted from the pandemic, which makes it impossible for people to provide for their families, their families' basic needs. The centuries-long crisis of white supremacy, entrenched racial inequality, and state-sanctioned violence, and the climate crisis that affects absolutely every one of us. When we look at the situation of women, and what is going on in our families and communities, with the understanding that class and as well as race shape women's lives just as much as surely as gender and sexuality, then we can organize and build movements that can move us toward justice and liberation. Interrogating economic privilege and racial privilege is particularly important at a time when the very meaning of feminism has become so incredibly distorted and is now thought to mean only access for financially secure white women to the highest levels of corporate and political power. Having always worked in grassroots movements for social justice, I often don't even recognize what passes for feminism now. The lean-end version of feminism, which is what we used to call bourgeois feminism, is simply not an option for most women, not only in this country, but all over the globe. Here's a definition of feminism that I shared in a speech at the first National Women's Studies Association conference in 1979. Quoting myself, "Feminism is a political theory in practice that struggles to free all women, women of color, working class women, poor women, disabled women, Jewish women, lesbians, old women, as well as white, economically privileged, heterosexual women. Anything less than this version of total freedom is not feminism, but merely female self-aggrandizement." If I was writing this definition today, I would add many more different kinds of women, including trans women, femmes, Muslim, and immigrant women. We are a big tent. And that was a point I was making in 1979, which was more than 40 years ago. Well, yes, more than 40 years ago. It is obvious that Matriarch PAC and also the candidates that you support understand this expansive and inclusive vision of feminism. It is critical that all of our voices be heard and that people who are deeply connected to the real life struggles of our communities get the opportunity to serve and represent us. Some of you may not know that I actually did what you have done and what some of you want to do, which is to run for office. In 2005, I decided to run for our city council in Albany, New York. I'd never been involved in electoral politics in that way, although I was a prime voter because my people bled and died for me to vote. So, of course, I was going to be a voter. But as I said, I'd never been involved in electoral politics. I lived then and still live in a predominantly Black, economically distressed community. And one of the major reasons that I decided to run was because of what was going on with police brutality, and with other issues having to do with police and violence. And so I found myself at the ripe old age of 50-something, running for office for the first time. And I learned a huge amount. I did win, and I actually went on to serve 2 terms on our Albany Common Council. We had a huge legacy machine in Albany, a Democratic machine. And I, of course, was not a part of that. So I served in a context, it's kind of like, I guess, the squad now serving in Congress, because in the executive branch, that's not where the support was coming from. The support was coming from the grassroots. One of the things that really interested me during those years about serving on the Common Council, it's called the Common Council in Albany, is that I did it as a Black feminist without necessarily bringing those Black feminist politics front and center in everything that I did. Every decision that I made, every way I evaluated a problem or a situation, all of it went right back to my roots in Black feminism and also in movements, progressive movements, leftist movements in general. So without explicitly saying, I'm your Black feminist councilwoman, I tried to do the work informed by my Black feminist values. I learned a huge amount. And one of the things I learned is why it is important for not the usual suspects to seek office, to run, to succeed, and then to govern. It does make a difference. And that's why Matriarch PAC is so important. It is supporting the people who would otherwise be shut out of that political game as it is played with big bucks and male patriarchal dominance. It is letting people like me and like you into that, and we see the difference that that can make. In order to talk about class and feminism, we also need to be able to talk about race. It is actually not possible to understand how class functions in the United States without seeing how it is inextricably tied to race and racial exploitation. You cannot talk about class in the United States without talking about race, and you cannot talk about race in the United States without talking about class. America's class structure is defined by race and racism, if for no other reason than the fact that American wealth was built on the genocide and land theft of indigenous people and slavery, the labor theft of enslaved Africans. The Combahee River Collective, which was already mentioned, not for nerds only, I hope, are wonks only, feminist wonks. I like that idea, that concept, because I certainly would be one of them. The Combahee River Collective, founded in the mid-1970s and most known for having written the Combahee River Collective Statement, made a significant contribution to creating ways for us to grasp how these various interlocking systems of oppression connect and how they even reproduce each other. Combahee also opened space in the second wave of the women's movement for people to grapple with the realities of difference and to figure out how to build solidarity and a stronger anti-racist women's movement. I am pretty sure that that is what Matriarch PAC is committed to, building an anti-racist women's movement for the 99%, for the people who are not in those C-suites and leaning in and doing whatever the hell else they do, but who are trying to figure out how to keep body and soul together and juggle all the things that we do. And for those of you who have those kinds of typical responsibilities of caring for family members, doing homeschooling at this point, virtual learning with your kids, wondering whether to send them to school, having health care that is hanging by a thread because it's connected to employment. Why? That's why we need Medicare for all. For all of you who are taking that step, making that commitment, we honor you and we support you. We have a big fight ahead, and it's terrific that we are meeting with each other a few days before the last day of voting in this 2020 election cycle. I know we have big hopes for what will follow after that day, as well as lots of nerves and anxiety too. But whatever happens, we do have a big fight ahead of us, and we can only do it together. I've always been a political optimist, despite all, because I'm based, and my political reality is based in people's struggle. And certainly when that struggle encompasses the incredible power and vision of motivated and brave women, then we are much more than halfway toward that goal that we have of liberation and justice. Thank you so much.